that's the best connection by being out there and witnessing from small little insects to big, predators. I mean, it's all connected.
Welcome to Wild Development Studio. Join us as we venture into the breathtaking realm of wildlife arts and untamed adventures. With captivating stories from the field and ideas to dive into the visual arts, we'll ignite your passion for conservation. Get ready to develop something wild.
Welcome to Wild Developments. I'm your guide, Lauren, and today I am thrilled to introduce Linda Wilinski, an award-winning wildlife photographer and conservationist dedicated to protecting Florida's freshwater springs and rivers. Linda's work, which has been featured in prestigious exhibits at Lou Gardens, Mount Dora, and Cedar Keys Art Center, tells powerful stories of natural Florida through breathtaking imagery. As a certified Florida Master Naturalist and Spring Ambassador, she uses her art to raise awareness and inspire others to become environmental stewards. Her passion for conservation extends beyond photography. She is a board member of the Rainbow River Conservation and works closely with organizations like the International Otter Survival Fund. Linda's love for nature began in childhood, and that deep connection has fueled her journey as a conservation photographer. She captures the beauty of wild spaces with respect, putting the well-being of wildlife first. Through her lectures, photography, and advocacy, Linda hopes to inspire us all to take action and protect the natural world before it's too late. Hi, Linda. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Good. Are you currently in Florida?
Yes, I am.
You're so
Central
lucky.
Florida.
Ah,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
stuck in
getting
Ohio.
hot, though.
Oh, yeah. Have the manatees all left the area?
Pretty much. Once the water, gets over 68, they move out and go back in the ocean mostly. But there are some that stick around in the spring-fed rivers.
So, just so our listeners know, you are a conservation photographer. What got you started in this line of business?
My husband and I moved to a spring-fed river about 3 years ago. We've been on the river camping and things like that. But once we actually lived here and I saw the wildlife and the water itself on a daily basis, I wanted to do something more than just take pictures. I wanted to tell a story because I felt like I needed to connect people with what we have here.
That I'm glad you said that because I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what is the difference between just photography and conservation photography?
You don't have to work for National Geographic because a lot of people are intimidated by that title, conservation. I am intimidated by itself too, but it really is just telling a story behind a picture. So it goes beyond the pretty image. And I always tell people I'm flattered when people say, "Oh, that's such a beautiful picture." But if someone goes out there and tries to advocate for those places, that is really the biggest thing that I'm aiming for. So I use my photography as a bridge to tell the story about the things that I care about.
And you did a photograph for Riverside Conservancy for manatee rescue, the last stand of a Florida treasure. What message was conveyed through that photograph?
So the picture has a funny story. I almost deleted it because it wasn't the quality that I wanted. It was so I'm very short and in order to do that split image, I had to like propel myself with my fins to the surface. And once I was in on the surface for, split seconds, I just clicked the shutter button. So the image isn't as great as I wanted it to be, but it had the drama, it had the feeling. And I think that's why River Conservancy really wanted that picture because it was dramatic in a way because there's this lonely manatee by itself in a spring and springs are in trouble, so it wasn't the cheery little cute manatee swimming up to people. It was a lonely manatee and we don't know kind of what happened to the mom. Did it starve? Things like that. So I think they chose it because it made people think more.
Excellent. I I travel to Crystal River every year, at least. We love that area. It is so beautiful with all the nature and how the manatees come in by the hundreds every year when it gets cold. I know I personally love manatees. Why do you feel passionately about sharing their story?
I think they're the poster child of Florida Springs. Everybody loves them because of their gentle demeanor that they have. And I think for people to really be compassionate about preserving something, they have to love it first. And the manatee is just the perfect example of love and one big chunky mermaid.
Absolutely agree. So is photography your full-time profession or do you do something else?
Unfortunately, it's not. I still work for the state of Florida, but plan to retire within the next 5 years. And right now, it's just a beautiful hobby that I have, and I greatly enjoy.
What is your favorite animal to photograph?
Otters, absolutely. I mean, otters and more otters and more otters. They're because they are a conservation story in itself. We've pretty much tried to kill them off in any way that we could. First, they were hunted almost to extinction. Then we poisoned the waterways, and then we eradicated a lot of wetlands. But they're still here. So I feel like it's not just their charismatic demeanor that they have, but it's a story of hope because they're still here.
So what is it about the otter that you love photographing?
Everything about them. I mean, from the tail flipping into the air to them crunching down on the crayfish, you know, teaching their offspring how to swim and how to feed. It's incredible. So I'm very, very fortunate to be able to see that. And I've missed a lot of photo opportunities in order to somehow establish a connection. I think some of the images only happened because of that, because I wasn't chasing after the shot. It was more like, okay, I'm in their home. I don't want to make myself feel unwelcome or, storm in their little house. It's just I was just gently knocking on their on their door and say, hey, do you mind having me? So and they did it. I was accepted. So, but that comes with a lot of respect for the wildlife, and like I said, a lot of missed photo opportunities.
I was gonna say I've been to Florida many times, and I think that's one of the few animals I have yet to see in the wild. Did you have to do that by kayak, or do you have a special spot that you go? Because I imagine they're a pretty skittish animal.
Yes, absolutely, and very fast. So I'm yeah 100% on my kayak. There was an incident where the otters were actually on a dock. And I paddled upstream and let myself drift down and took a picture, and then drifted back, paddled back up, drifted back down. So, and I got closer and closer. The more I realized they're no longer like paying attention to me. With wildlife, I always see there's three different stages. First, they're cautious, right? And then they become curious, and then they become comfortable. So those three things I always keep in mind. So, the otters actually let me hold on to the dock, and I had my camera lens rested on the dock to shoot the images. But that's a very rare occasion.
Well, you
But it
bring
was
up
an amazing experience.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point though, because people looking at a picture of an animal, I mean, that is a split second in time, but they don't understand all the hours in time that it takes sitting in a place or getting the animals used to your presence in order to be able to
Absolutely,
snap that picture. So yeah,
absolutely.
that's great that you were able to do that. Do you have any other tips for anybody that would like to do wildlife photography?
Put yourself in the animal's shoes. I think that is really the biggest thing. Conservation photography should be done ethically. Sometimes you don't gain friends with that. The reason I'm saying is because sometimes I don't disclose locations just because it's a sensitive area.
Mm.
And people tend to not like that. They're like, well, you got to take a picture. I want to take a picture. But especially with offspring, I got to the point where I don't even post any type of offspring pictures in certain areas until they're kind of more grown and they don't depend on the mom as much to, not because I want to just be my pictures, but it's because I don't want to add any more stress to the mom and trying to raise her baby. So it's always good to keep in mind the wildlife comes first, and the second is the shot. So that's my biggest advice, and because eventually you will get rewarded for those missed opportunities. It really does come around. I cannot say that enough.
Beautiful. And I was going to bring up, because manatees are federally protected, what are some considerations that you have to take into account when taking pictures of these animals? Because being in Crystal River, I've seen people from very much out of town grabbing babies and doing
Yeah.
all sorts of things that they really should not be doing. Because, like you said, they're so gentle, and that kind of puts them in a position where they can get mistreated like that. So, what are some special considerations you have to think?
It's a touchy subject, literally.
Yeah.
So I avoid Crystal River most of the time just because it's a sensitive thing. But I do think that everybody needs to be underwater and see them for the first time. But over time, I think less being underwater is better. And it's also important for people to realize that manatees have had a hard time with seagrasses and things like that. So they literally have to choose between feeding themselves or staying warm. And the manatees choose to stay warm while starving. So when we're out there in a spring and there's no vegetation and we're, chasing after them, they're not only losing their energy, but we're also risking them to have cold stress. So it's very, you always have to put yourself in the manatees or in the wildlife's shoes. Do you really need to be there? Do you really need to be that close? And at what price does it come? So I think over the last winter, I decided to challenge myself to take pictures without being in the water. I'm not saying that nobody should swim with manatees. I think it's a beautiful experience, but because I've done it plenty of times, I felt like I needed to lessen my impact as well. So I took that challenge to myself to take the pictures out of my kayak. So what I did was I kayaked in the area where there's manatees, but without really exactly seeing the manatees underwater. I just dumped my heavy underwater housing into the water and just kept shooting. And luckily, some of the images turned out, but I it felt really, really fulfilling because I reduced my impact and I felt like it was just a better way to, photograph them.
I saw that video on YouTube. I was going to ask you about that, because you are essentially shooting that footage blind, which is
Yes.
super impressive, because the footage was absolutely incredible. I Did you waste a lot of film because you were like your angle was off or anything, or it was just like time and patience and everything came together for you?
A lot of Motrin for back pain because of holding the heavy underwater housing, in and out of the kayak. But it was a lot of images. It was a lot of images that I also deleted just because I really didn't know, the pose that they had or if they were close, if they were far away. Um, but it was almost like a Christmas present, you didn't know what was in the package until I got the SD card out and looked at it on my laptop. So I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and the footage was incredible, like I said. And then anybody that's listening, I'm going to be tagging that video and your website in the show description so they can check out your work, because
Thank you.
it is beautiful. Now, do you have a favorite piece of equipment that you use for photography? And it doesn't have to be like a specific camera or anything. It could be a favorite bag or hiking shoes or anything like that.
I think my favorite tool is people that inspire me. I really listen to a lot of podcasts, and my circle of friends is also very inspiring. So I know that's probably not the typical answer, but it's very important to have passion. I think in photography, because I don't think you can photograph too many things or feel deeply without having passion and kind of to really show that in your images. So besides that, I have my favorite above water for otters and other wildlife is of course a zoom lens 400 millimeter, just because it keeps me safe and it keeps the wildlife safe. So that's pretty much my favorite. And of course, underwater. I love underwater photography. I have lots to learn, but it's just so much fun because a lot of people don't get to see underwater. And for me to take images and show people that will never snorkel and show them what it looks like, and it's really, really my favorite.
So you do all snorkeling, and I know you do from the kayak, like you were saying, but do you scuba dive at all?
No, I don't. I stay on the surface, just
Okay.
snorkeling.
Snort. So do you have any safety considerations? Are you going out with somebody else?
Yeah, it's funny because people always ask me, they're like, you swim with sharks and you swim with an alligator in the Everglades, and aren't you scared? And I always tell them, I said, I-75 is scary.
Yeah.
If you look at the statistics, there's about 4,000 car accidents or fatalities in a year versus alligator attacks, maybe 20 in the last 30, 40 years. So, I always kind of try to put that in perspective. Of course, common sense. The wildlife has an instinctive fear of people, but it's always good not to, snorkel at dusk or dawn, feeding time, things like that. Don't get too close to a mama gator, because
Mhm.
you know what she's gonna do. So common sense is a is a really good safety thing.
Yes, I agree. Now, I find there are two schools of thought for wildlife photographers when it comes to ISO. Do you low ISO or do you let that go high?
I think with every type of art, you kind of have to find your way
Mhm.
and see what works for you. I usually do a high ISO. But again, everybody kind of has to figure out what works for them the most. With a friend of mine, he does amazing photography, but his settings are completely different than mine. Um, Even though I would like to copy what he does because I like his stuff so much, I found that if I have his settings, it doesn't come out the same.
Mhm.
It's kind of strange, but I think you find your way to photograph things. Of
Yeah.
course, common, ISO, aperture, and shutter. I mean, it's all, depending on light, but to fine tune it, I think it's everybody's own little thing to develop.
I was taught to do a very low ISO, and that does not work a lot of the times, especially I've tried to get birds and insects in flight a lot of times. So that doesn't usually work out too well for me. So I went to high ISO and I like it better. But yeah, like you said, it's just a different style than somebody else is used to. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So every time I travel, I research local events. And when I was in Crystal River in February, I believe you were doing some sort of photography event or something. And I think it was closed or like members only or something like that. And I'm like, oh man, I really wanted to go.
Oh, see, you should
How?
have called me. Yes, it was a photography club that invited me, and I was actually very intimidated by it because these are people that have done photography older than I am, longer than I'm old. So to go into this room full of professionals really and to tell them, little things was very it was highly intimidating, let's just say, because I wasn't sure how they would react to it, but obviously they wanted me there. So it was very well received. I received a lot of clapping and emails, follow-up emails after that, thanking me for my time and kind of widening their perspective on photography. So it was very interesting. It was a very, very good experience. I'm glad I did it because I almost didn't. I'm like, man, what can I teach those people? You know?
That's fantastic. I'm glad you followed through and continued to do it. I mean, that can be very intimidating, especially when there are people that have, they grew up on film and stuff like that. And
Exactly.
that's a whole nother world of photography that, yeah,
Absolutely.
I am not used to. Do you have any special way to organize your files? Because that is the most boring part of photography for me. I hate that part.
You know, my trick is to do it right away because I feel like that's it's just discipline, part of discipline. The first thing I do when I get off the water is to get it off the SD card and to put it in a folder depending on location. With otters, I have found that I also need to do like a subfolder, and depending on, if I have a lot of images of let's say the river, I have subfolders for animals, and then I have subfolders for landscapes, things like that. Because if I have a lot of images, I don't want to just go to this folder and look at 5,000 pictures trying to, find a landscape picture. So yeah, the more pictures I have, the more subfolders I have. I think that's the best tip I can give.
Do you use Lightroom or anything like that?
I do use Lightroom. I have not tried Photoshop, and Lightroom has taken me about 5 years to convince myself I'm not cheating.
Yeah, it's okay to lighten it
I
up a little bit or whatever.
Yeah, because I always felt like I'm like, no, but I didn't take it that way. And a friend of mine just came up to me. She's like, Clyde Butcher has a dark room, right? And what he does is kind of like a light room. So then it clicked, and I'm like, okay, I'm okay using it.
Yeah, somebody when I was doing a photography class, they compared Lightroom to developing the film. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, I was the same as you. I'm like, okay, now I'm okay with it.
Yep.
So if somebody wanted to get started in wildlife photography, what advice would you have for them?
To really go outside and take in nature. I think that's the best connection, by being out there and witnessing from small little insects to big, predators. I mean, it's all connected, and the more you're out there, the more you're gonna understand.
And I see you do a lot of it looks like art shows. Is that been helpful for you to get your name out there?
I do art shows because it's like a necessary evil,
Right?
you know. I do about 2 to 3 a year. I don't do too many, just because my focus right now is not the monetary part. It's really educating people, but it does get the word out on, hey, if you're interested, I'm giving this class. So it is a tool of making people aware and inviting them to any type of upcoming talks and things like that, because I give the talks free, just because I'm very passionate about educating people, because I think that's when changes happen.
Agreed. What are some of the things that you talk about?
So I have a talk on conservation photography that just goes over, how to photograph wildlife, what to do, what not to do, things like that. And then I also have a talk about Florida in general, with focus on freshwater springs. So that includes, the good pictures and the bad pictures, because I think part of conservation photography is not to just show the prettiness, but also show the perils that we're seeing in the decline of springs.
Mhm. What are some ways that we can be better stewards of Florida Springs? Because they are, if nobody's listen, let me start that over again. People that are listening, if you've not been to Florida Springs, they are absolutely pristine and gorgeous in some areas, and in other areas they are heavily trafficked and polluted in some areas. What are some things that we can do to help them out?
The first thing is it really starts in your backyard by planting natives. Wherever you live in Florida, you're impacting the aquifer. So it starts with planting natives because it reduces the fertilizer, which is fueling, that algae. Also joining nonprofits, Florida Springs Institute, Florida Springs Council, any type of nonprofit local group is always good. Educating people, adhering to the things that state parks ask you, don't trample underwater vegetation. If you have a boat, don't anchor in the underwater vegetation. And yeah, just try to educate yourself, do some research on springs and try to share as much as possible because it makes social media makes it so great to spread awareness. I mean, that is one thing I love about social media. You can really get a message out.
Yeah. What has been your favorite experience out in the field with wildlife?
Definitely an otter mom teaching her cub that must have just gotten out of the den how to hunt. That was an incredible experience because I just sat in my kayak and I could barely hold the camera still because I was just so excited and nervous that she actually the pup was on a log, and the mom dove down. Within seconds she came up with a little turtle, and she flipped the turtle on its back so it couldn't get away, which is like brilliant, right? Brutal,
Mhm.
but brilliant. And it just pretty much taught its baby how to eat a turtle. I mean, it was incredible. It was, I mean, it if if a person would have done what they did to the turtle, I would have been up in arms. But it
Yeah.
was just such it's a completely different energy when an animal hunts. So yeah, it was very heartwarming and touching because she let me be there,
Yeah.
so it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, that was something I meant to ask you earlier when you were talking about getting close to the otters. Do you think that you have witnessed or encountered behaviors that people otherwise don't know about?
I think so. I don't know if I really have a connection with them. A lot of people say, oh, you're the otter whisperer, but I feel like everybody can do that. You just have to respect them enough. And it's not just otters, it's any type of wildlife. Once they know that you're respecting them enough and you give them enough space, I think they're growing more okay with you being in the area.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you put in the time, and we
Yes.
need to learn how to interact with nature. And it sounds like you're being a great example and teaching others how to do that too.
I try to. I really try to. Because all the preaching doesn't work if you're not an example.
Absolutely. Where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. That's where most of my pictures are, at Linda W Photography. I also have a YouTube channel with short little videos. That's also under Linda W Photography, as well as the Facebook page. It's pretty much everything is under Linda W Photography. I do have a website. It's not very active. I just take too many pictures to update my website. So that's kind of like on the back burner.
Yeah. And again, I'll be sure to tag all of those things on the show description so people can check that out. And before we go, what is one tip you have for someone that would like to reconnect with nature?
To go outside, and learn about your area, learn about the good things, learn about the bad things, try to make the bad things better by being an advocate.
That is great advice. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Linda.
No problem. It was my honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And until next time, get outside and see what develops.
Thanks for joining Wild Development Studio. We hope this exploration into the world of wildlife arts and adventure has sparked a desire to get outside and connect with something wild. If you have an adventure that's awe-inspiring, don't hesitate to share. Click the link in the description to submit your story to have it featured on our show or be a guest. Until next time, keep connecting to the wild and see what develops. The views, opinions, and statements expressed by individuals during Wild Development Studio productions do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Wild Development Studio or its affiliates. Participation in any activities, expeditions, or adventures discussed or promoted during our content may involve inherent risks. It is strongly advised that individuals conduct thorough research, seek professional guidance, and take all necessary precautions before engaging in any such activities. Wild Development Studio, its representatives, or employees shall not be held responsible for any injury, loss, damage, accident, or unforeseen incident that may occur as a result of participating in activities inspired by or discussed in our content. By choosing to engage with our content or act upon any information provided, individuals do so at their own risk and discretion.